Hey guys, tonight we ride into a world of biting wind, hard saddles, and even harder expectations. You're not sitting safely behind a screen anymore. You're waking up in the vast and brutal Mongol Empire, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments, what's your location and what time is it where you're watching? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun. There's no alarm clock, no soft bedding, and certainly no snooze button. Just the distant whinny of a horse and a bitter draft sneaking through seams in the felt-covered walls. The smell of smoke, sweat, and last night's boiled meat hits you like a slap. The yurt is dark and cramped, its dome-like ceiling a patchwork of hide and smoke-stained fabric. Somewhere to your left, someone coughs, loudly. The air feels like it's made of old stew and frozen dirt. You try to stretch, but there's not much room. You're wedged between another body and a stack of blankets that may or may not have once been part of a goat. The floor is hard-packed earth and your back already aches from the bed, which is really just a layer of skins over uneven ground. Your limbs are stiff, your joints complain, and your stomach growls like a wolf. The fire at the center of the yurt is dying. You see coals glowing faintly beneath a shallow layer of ash. One of your campmates pokes it back to life using what might be a femur. The kettle above it is already boiling, filled not with coffee, not with tea, but with fermented mare's milk that smells like feet and cheese had a baby. You try not to gag. You fail. Breakfast is being portioned out by the woman of the yurt, who speaks quickly and sharply and never looks at you directly. You get a small bowl of arag, fermented mare's milk, and a lump of bortsog deep-fried dough, but don't get excited. It's stale, oily, and somehow both dry and wet. If the family's lucky today, maybe you'll all split a cold, grayish slice of last week's boiled mutton fat. Your teeth sink into it like biting wax. It's chewy, tasteless, and yet somehow slimy at the same time. You chew out of obligation, because in this empire, food isn't pleasure, it's fuel. If it keeps you alive, it's good enough. You shift uncomfortably. Everything you own smells like a combination of tallow and unwashed socks. Your long tunic robe, is stiff with last week's sweat and horse grease. The fur lining itches against your collarbone. Your belt's too tight because the leather shrinks in the cold, or maybe you've just lost weight. Everyone does. You step outside. The moment the door flap lifts, the wind punches you in the face. It's sharp, dry, and tastes like dust and ash. The steppe stretches around you like a never-ending canvas of brown and gray. There are no trees, no shelter, just open space, cracked earth, and low hills rolling like waves in every direction. The sun hasn't risen yet, but already the cold slices through you like thin knives. Your boots crunch over frost as you trudge to the horse line. Dozens of them tied loosely, stomping and snorting. A few kick. One stares you down like it knows you're not built for this. You reach for your horse's lead. Your hands are already numb. You fumble with the rope. The horse shifts, unimpressed. You saddle up. It's not a padded leather Western-style thing. It's wood, carved, narrow, painful. The stirrups dangle like medieval torture devices. Mongols ride differently, high in the stirrups, knees bent, bouncing slightly to absorb the movement. You, on the other hand, feel every jolt. Every step of your horse's hooves sends a thud into your spine like someone's hammering your tailbone. And guess what? You'll be riding for hours. You're not headed into battle, at least not yet, but the Mongol day starts early and it's filled with movement. Hunting, herding, scouting, war drills, or sometimes just migrating the entire camp because the grass here got boring. The horses are small but fierce, made for endurance, not comfort. Your thighs burn after 20 minutes. Your teeth chatter. There's no let's pull over and rest. You keep up or you fall behind. And if you fall behind, no one's coming back for you. You squint against the rising sun. It's blinding. The sky is painfully blue. A hawk circles in the distance, scanning the plains. You pull your deal tighter, trying to block the wind that's now picking up grit and hurling it directly into your eyes. The landscape looks the same in every direction. If someone blindfolded you and spun you around, you'd never find camp again. The boy riding beside you, maybe 12 years old but built like sinew and iron, laughs when you sneeze. He hands you a strip of dried horse meat. It's like chewing on wood that hates you. But you smile and nod, because the last person who insulted a gift got slapped off their saddle. Historians still argue whether Mongol culture was more tolerant than others of its time, or just more pragmatic. Either way, kindness is often measured in calories and rope. The sun climbs higher. Your lips crack. Your nose bleeds a little from the dry air. Your fingers sting when you try to grip the reins, and it's only been 3 hours. Remember back home when you complained about your morning commute? Try doing it at a gallop, on a wooden saddle, in negative wind chill, while drinking sour milk and dodging horse droppings the size of grapefruits. And the best part, this is a good morning in the Mongol Empire. No raids, no enemies, no diseases sweeping through camp. Just a typical, brutal sunrise with breakfast that tastes like regret and travel that feels like punishment. And the worst part, you still have 12 hours left in this day. The horizon is still yawning when you realize you haven't even reached the real part of your day. Riding through the dawn chill was just your intro, your morning scroll, your pre-coffee doomwalk. Now the sun is climbing and the steppe is shimmering and your thighs already feel like you wrestled a goat herd. But rest, not even on the menu. Because in the Mongol Empire everyone moves, constantly. Whether you're a soldier, herder, scout, or simply a family member along for the imperial ride, the day demands your motion. Your orders today: herd displacement. Not glorious, not poetic. Just a 40-mile loop to relocate some sheep, inspect pasture, and maybe check in on a cousin's camp that sent smoke signals last night. You're still sore from the last ride, and today's terrain will not go easy on you. Mounting your horse again feels like trying to sit on a tree branch with bruised thighs. The saddle digs in like it's judging your entire existence. There's no cushion, just hard edges and the distinct feeling your inner legs will never forgive you. You glance around, hoping someone else is struggling too. Nope. Even the elders ride with straight backs and zero complaint. They look like leather sculptures. You've barely started when you discover another surprise. You're riding on an empty stomach. That crumb of greasy dough and shot of sour milk, that was it. No road snacks, no refueling stops. Your belly growls and the man riding in front of you tosses a look over his shoulder like he heard it. He probably did. Mongol hearing is terrifying. Mid-morning sunlight hits the steppe like a searchlight. There's no shade, no buildings, just open, endless plain. Dust kicks up behind the group like smoke trailing a burning cart. You squint. The wind cuts straight through your clothes. At first you thought this place would be hot, some kind of desert. But this is high-altitude land. Flat but freezing. The kind of cold that creeps under your belt and numbs your spine. Somewhere in the distance, a goat bleats. Or was it a man? Hard to tell. You pass a flock of sheep with their tenders, small figures bundled in wool and fur. They wave lazily, barely noticing the dust cloud you kick up. You nod like you know what you're doing, like you belong. But truthfully, you're concentrating entirely on staying balanced in the saddle while your knees try to detach from your body in protest. One of the herders hands you a skin pouch. Salvation, water. You thank him with your eyes, then take a sip and gag instantly. It's not water, it's kumis again. Fermented mare's milk, but aged longer, warmer, and definitely not improved. It hits the back of your throat like flat vinegar with a hint of barn. You try not to spit it out. It would be rude. The man watches, amused. You offer the pouch back, shaking slightly. He pats your shoulder and gallops ahead. Hydration is tricky in the Mongol world. There are no taps, no streams running nearby. The nomads rely on carried water or melt snow if they must. But even in summer, access is tightly controlled, especially on the move. You'll learn, one way or another, to ration every sip. Historians still debate just how mobile Mongol camps could remain with such limited access to natural water, but what's clear is they adapted frighteningly well. You, on the other hand, not so much. You shift in the saddle for relief and discover another painful truth: saddle sores. Blisters from yesterday's ride have multiplied. You're riding like someone balancing on lava rocks, wincing at every jolt. It's not glamorous. You imagine what Mongol warriors must have looked like: fierce, deadly, agile on horseback. You look like someone who lost a bet at a Renaissance fair. By midday, your horse's sweat has mixed with your own. The smell is legendary. You're no longer bothered by it. You're bothered by the flies. They dive bomb your face and hands, biting even through fabric. You try swatting. You try smearing mud. Nothing works. You want to stop, just for 5 minutes, just to stretch. But there's no 5 minutes on the steppe. The group keeps moving. You can either keep up or get very familiar with a night alone in wolf country. The sun is directly overhead now, and heat radiates off your back even as the wind keeps slicing at your front. You are somehow both hot and cold. Your lips are cracked. Your nose is bleeding again. You've lost count of how many hours you've been riding. When the party finally pauses, it's not to rest. It's to check hooves, retie loads, and scan the horizon for any sign of raiders. You dismount like a collapsing tent. Your legs wobble beneath you. Someone snickers. You lean against your horse and try to look useful. One of the older riders tosses you a strip of dried curd arul. It looks like chalk and tastes like sour wood. It crumbles in your mouth like broken dreams. But you chew. You always chew. A younger boy slaps your arm and points at a shadow in the distance. You squint. Something's moving fast. Not your party, not herd animals. Scouts, maybe. Messengers, or worse, raiders. You pretend you understand, nod seriously, then quietly panic. Fortunately, they don't come closer. A false alarm. The mood lightens. Someone cracks a joke in a language you don't understand, and everyone laughs. You fake a chuckle and hope it wasn't about your saddle posture. You remount, groaning internally. The sun is slowly dipping now, casting long gold beams across the dry grass. Your shadow stretches beside you like a warning. You think about water again, about clean sheets, about Netflix. Then a bird screeches above and snaps you back. There's something about this land, its silence, its harshness, its complete disregard for your comfort, that starts to burrow into your brain. You feel small, not in the romantic awe of nature way, more like the grass wouldn't notice if I disappeared way. The horses begin to slow. You think maybe it's time to stop for the night, but no. You've just reached the real destination, the cousins' camp. More yurts, more smoke, more strangers staring at you like you just dropped out of the sky. And you know what's next. Dinner, sort of. You're not quite sure what smells worse, you, your horse, or dinner. The cousins' camp is larger than your own, a cluster of 6 yurts, all leaning slightly to one side, ringed by a low wooden fence meant more for suggestion than defense. Horses are tethered to posts, bleeding goats roam like they own the place, and smoke from a dozen dung fires curls lazily into the evening sky. You dismount like a sack of overcooked rice dumplings, landing hard on shaky legs. The pain in your thighs is now constant. It's part of you, like a new organ made entirely of suffering. You walk bow-legged toward the central yurt, trying to look like you've done this before. You haven't. Someone hands you a bowl before you're even inside. Warm, heavy, mysterious. Inside is a grayish broth dotted with globules of fat and what might be onions or possibly boiled leather. You take a sip. It's blood soup, salty, metallic, and slightly sweet. The blood, usually from a sheep or horse, is cooked quickly to avoid clotting, then mixed with salt and a few scraps of meat or grain. It tastes exactly how it sounds. But after a full day on the saddle, you drink radiator fluid if it had calories. You force it down, watching others slurp without hesitation. An old man near the fire belches loudly, then grins at you. There's a piece of tendon in his teeth. You smile back, and he raises his bowl in toast. You toast him back, mentally preparing your stomach for what's next. Because soup isn't the whole meal. Oh no. The main course arrives in a large, shallow metal dish placed in the center of the yurt. Boiled meat, mostly lamb, hacked into chunks, bones and all. It's served with no seasoning, no sides, and absolutely no cutlery. Everyone reaches in with fingers, pulling at tendons and gnawing on ribs like it's the world's least romantic barbecue. You hesitate, big mistake. A woman elbows you aside, not aggressively, just impatiently. She grabs a fatty piece, tears it in half with her teeth, and hands you the stringy leftover like it's a gift. You take it, you chew. It tastes like warm shoe, but you keep chewing because in the Mongol Empire, eating slowly means eating last. And eating last means eating bones, and not the marrow-rich, celebratory bones. The what's left after the dog's bones. Vegetables? Forget it. Fiber is a fairy tale. Most steppe-dwelling Mongols rarely saw anything green except moss. Historians still argue whether seasonal wild onions and roots were used enough to prevent nutritional deficiencies. But tonight, none of that's on offer. Just meat, meat, and more meat. You hear a joke told in low tones, followed by a round of snorting laughter. It sounds like it's about the city dweller who tried to use a knife and fork. You pretend to laugh along as you wipe grease on your deal and suck lamb fat off your fingers. And then comes the drink again. Not water, never water. Arag passed around in a battered wooden bowl that everyone drinks from. You sip, trying not to think about who had it last. The taste hits your sinuses with a sour slap. The alcohol level's low, but the tang lingers. Your stomach flips. You steady yourself with more lamb. By the fire, someone starts playing a morin kuur, a two-stringed horsehead fiddle. The music is slow, mournful, the kind of melody that feels like wind whistling through bone. It's beautiful, aching, ancient. You close your eyes for a second, imagining you're in a dream. You're not, your knee cramps, badly. You limp outside for fresh air, stepping carefully over a dog that growls sleepily at you. The wind has picked up again, colder now, sharper. It slices through the thin spots in your clothes and bites your neck like ice-teethed wolves. You clutch your deal tighter and scan the darkness. No lanterns, no torches, just moonlight and the faint outlines of yurts. You realize suddenly that you need to relieve yourself, badly. This brings us to an unpleasant truth. There are no toilets, no outhouses, no designated spot. The steppe is your bathroom and the rules are simple. Go far, dig a hole if you have time, and for heaven's sake, don't let the horses see you. You shuffle into the darkness, tripping twice over what might be dry dung or a rock or someone's abandoned slipper. Your boots squelch in the mud near the edge of camp. You do what you must, quickly, awkwardly, praying no one is watching. But someone always is. A child laughs in the distance. You head back to the yurt, cheeks burning, hands numb. You're offered a final drink, this time a hot fatty broth made from bones boiled for hours. It coats your throat like grease, warms your chest slightly, then sits in your belly like an oily stone. As the fire dies down, you stretch out on a mat near the yurt wall. The floor is still earth. Cold seeps through your deal and into your spine. Someone hands you a woolen blanket. It smells like goat and old fire. You hug it like a lifeline. Sleep comes slow. The yurt creaks in the wind. A baby whimpers nearby. A man snores like a bear choking on a drum. And the smell, sweat, smoke, mutton, and horses lingers like a second skin. You shift, trying to get comfortable, but your hip is pressed against something sharp, probably a rock, or maybe the day's trauma solidified into a small pebble of pain. And then just as you drift off, one final sound, someone vomiting outside. Turns out you weren't the only one who wasn't ready for blood soup and curdled milk. You don't wake up, you're woken up. It's still dark. Not early morning gray, not cozy candlelight, just absolute merciless black. Someone's voice barks something in a language you don't speak, and a boot nudges your ribs with the tenderness of a kick. You sit up in confusion, your blanket tangled around your legs like a curse. Time to ride again. There's no coffee, no groggy scroll through your phone, just cold water splashed onto your face from a cracked bowl and the realization that you slept in your clothes again. Which is good because those were also your pillow, your blanket, and depending on how you count, your only defense against frostbite. As you step outside, the wind hits you like you insulted its mother. Your lips crack wider, your nostrils sting, and worst of all, you realize you'll have to get dressed properly now. Enter Mongol fashion, a survival system disguised as medieval hazing. Your deal, the long robe-like outerwear every Mongol wears, is stiff with dried sweat and mutton grease. You shimmy into it, the way a sock might try to put on another sock. Then come the woolen trousers, which somehow manage to be both itchy and freezing. Your leather boots, cracked, weathered, and suspiciously damp, are slipped on with a grunt. And over all of this, the sash, which you tie tightly enough to hold tools, a knife, your lunch, and maybe your dignity. This isn't fashion for fun. It's fashion for survival, and you still look like you got dressed during a tornado. Hygiene is not a top priority on the steppe. You reach for something to scrub your face with, only to be handed a piece of coarse wool. No soap, no water basin, just a vigorous rub and a prayer that the dirt isn't from horse hooves. Bathing? Not today. Not this week, maybe not even this season. Mongols believed washing too often could invite sickness or disturb the spirits. Historians still argue whether this was superstition, practical drought survival, or a cultural defense against steppe diseases. But either way, you're not about to see a hot bath unless you hallucinate one. And that smell you noticed earlier, that lingering cloud of horse sweat, sour milk, and armpit stew, surprise, it's you. The grease on your hands was from your own hair. The stiffness in your deal is partially you made. And your breath, imagine licking an onion, then drinking old yogurt. You brush your teeth if you could, but toothbrushes haven't shown up yet, and the best you can manage is chewing on a twig from the previous night's fire. You scrape your tongue with a fingernail. It helps exactly not at all. A woman across the yurt smears a grayish salve across her cheekbones, animal fat mixed with ash. Sunscreen Mongol style. Another rubs burned onion paste into her scalp to fight lice. You are invited to do the same. You decline politely, then change your mind when a small bug crawls across your collarbone. Even beauty is brutal here. No perfumes, no soaps, no lotions. Scent is survival. You want to smell like the steppe. You want to smell like you belong. Because if you don't, the horses know. And worse, so do the people. You try to run your fingers through your hair, which has now formed a sort of independent helmet. It crunches. You abandon the effort. Someone tosses you a small leather pouch. It's toilet supplies or what passes for them. Dried grass, a few flat stones, and a crumpled piece of cloth you'd rather not ask about. You tuck it into your belt with a silent promise to your future self. We're getting through this. Then breakfast. It's yesterday's leftovers boiled into today's gruel. A thick, greasy sludge ladled into a wooden bowl that still holds traces of last night's lamb fat and possibly this morning's arag. You blow on it. You sip. It coats your mouth like liquid suede. You swallow and focus on the warmth. Someone offers you a fat-soaked dumpling, which is actually not bad if you ignore the fact it contains no filling and the outer dough has the texture of a wet glove. Still, you eat. You always eat. Out here, calories are currency. Another rider enters the yurt and speaks sharply. There's motion coming. A group is forming. You look outside, horses being saddled, arrows being counted. You squint at your reflection in the water basin and see someone who looks rough, really rough, but still alive. Your belt digs into your waist. Your deal sags a little on the left. You adjust it clumsily, watching others move with fluid, practiced ease. There's no mirror here, but you already know. You look like someone wearing your clothes for the first time. Everyone else looks born in theirs. You try to fit in. You copy how they walk, slightly bow-legged, chest forward, eyes sharp. You nod at others as you pass, not too much, just enough. You try not to trip on the guy rope outside the yurt. You fail. Dust rises behind the first group of riders leaving camp. You're told to join the second wave, a scout mission. You nod like you know what that means. You don't. You mount your horse and try not to cry. Your deal flaps in the wind as you gallop out into the blinding sun. Your eyes water. Your lips split again. You grip the reins so hard your knuckles go numb. Someone hands you a cloth to tie over your face. You're now dressed like a medieval desert bandit, except it's all for practicality, not cool points. And as the horses thunder across the grass, your stomach groans, because fermented milk and blood gruel, not a kind combo. You feel it bubble. There's no bathroom on the steppe. And suddenly, that small crumpled cloth in your belt starts feeling very important. You are now intimately acquainted with one of the Mongol Empire's most overlooked realities. Your body is not your friend anymore. The jolting gallop of the horse churns your insides with every bounce. Your breakfast, an unholy union of curdled dairy, sinewy meat, and regret, is staging a full-blown rebellion in your gut. You try to breathe through it, but the wind's dry edge is slicing your nostrils raw, and now your eyes are watering for a whole new reason. The group pushes forward, 4, maybe 5 riders ahead of you, all perfectly balanced on their small but muscular horses. You, meanwhile, are trying not to vomit, cry, or pass out. Welcome to the Mongol Empire, a place where your dignity and your digestive system are on permanent vacation. The mission seems straightforward enough. You're scouting grazing territory, checking water availability, and confirming that a previous camp wasn't raided or spoiled. But to get there, you're riding through barren, wind-blasted flatlands dotted with thorny shrubs and the occasional suspicious skull. You're too dehydrated to ask what kind. You can't help but admire your companions. They ride like they were born on horseback, because they were. Mongol children began riding by the time they could stand. Saddles before spoons. They learn to mount, steer, and fire a bow before they can count their own fingers. You're clenching with every muscle in your body and praying your horse doesn't sneeze. Sit looser, someone barks behind you. You try. It almost works, until your saddle sores hit a pressure point that feels like stepping on a Lego with your entire spine. Someone laughs. Again. The sun is brutal now. It's not just heat, it's white. Light so sharp it turns everything silver. You tie the face cloth tighter across your nose and mouth, but your lips still sting and crack. You taste iron, not from a battle, just your own dumb skin. Hours pass. There's no concept of mileage, just distance measured by fatigue and the number of dried arul snacks someone tosses your way. You chew slowly, not because it's delicious. It isn't, but because chewing gives your brain something to focus on besides pain. Eventually, the group stops. A water source is nearby, a shallow spring sunken into a muddy basin. You dismount, your legs trembling with betrayal. Your boots hit the ground like bricks. You wobble, dizzy, stomach still threatening to file a formal complaint. You squat near the spring. The water is clear but smells faintly of sulfur. You don't care. You scoop up a handful, drink, then realize too late you forgot to check if it was for horses or humans. Oops. A rider hands you a ladle. You accept it, grateful, and try not to look like someone who may or may not be about to explode. Nearby, the group begins scanning the horizon. One man releases a falcon, letting it soar high above the plains. It's a trained hunter, used to spot prey and patrol terrain. The bird circles once, twice, then drifts eastward. Your leader whistles sharply, time to ride again. You curse silently. You haven't even digested, let alone recovered, but complaining, that's not a thing here. You mount up, slower this time, and try to find a less punishing way to sit. There isn't one. As you ride, your nose begins to run, not from illness, just the wind. The dry, endless wind that never stops. It dries your sinuses until they crack, then floods them without warning. You reach up to wipe your face, but your sleeve is crusted with everything you've already wiped since sunrise. Someone hands you a rag. It's stiff, vaguely damp, and smells like feet. You use it anyway. Personal hygiene on the steppe is less about cleanliness and more about endurance. Your clothes are supposed to soak up sweat, oil, and dirt, like wearable compost bins. Once they're completely saturated, you stop noticing. So does everyone else. You look over at a rider cleaning his teeth with a stringy piece of tendon. Yes, dried tendon. He runs it between his teeth, grins at you with foamy gums, then tosses it to the ground like a used floss stick from hell. You start to appreciate how little you appreciated your old toothbrush. Historians still argue whether Mongol hygiene was truly as minimal as chroniclers claimed, or if outsiders simply misunderstood the steppe standards. After all, what looks like filth to a visiting European monk might just be survival efficiency in goat fat packaging. Later, the group halts again, this time at a former campsite. You see the remnants, circles of charred ash, scattered bones, a few discarded arrows, and a broken pot. One rider dismounts, kneels, and touches the ash, still warm. Everyone becomes very still. You scan the horizon, nothing. But that doesn't mean safe. Mongols are notoriously quiet when they want to be. Raiding parties can appear like ghosts, silent hooves, no metal clanking, bows drawn before you even smell their horses. You realize with a sinking feeling that you are very much not armed. You have a knife, maybe, somewhere under your belt, and you're fairly sure you'd drop it the moment anyone looked at you wrong. Someone hands you a bow. You hold it like it's made of glass and scorpions. The string is taut. The wood is laminated and curves backward in that deadly Mongol way. You're handed 3 arrows. Congratulations. You're now responsible for defending your life with a weapon you've never used, on a horse you barely understand, while wearing clothes that haven't been washed since Genghis Khan was born. You try to knock an arrow, it slips, someone hisses, you try again. This time it works sort of. The scout returns, signaling all clear. The tension breaks like dry kindling. Everyone exhales. You tuck the bow under your saddle and pretend it was all very normal. The rest of the ride back is faster. No one speaks. You're moving at near full gallop. The dust burns your throat. Your horse veers sharply left to avoid a rabbit hole and you nearly tumble off. You clutch the reins and somehow stay on. Barely. By the time you see camp again, your body is jelly and your mind is fog. You don't feel triumphant. You feel processed. Like meat. Back at camp, you slide off your horse and immediately regret every decision that led you to this moment. Your legs buckle slightly. Your knees creak like an old wagon. Your backside feels like it's grown a second set of bones, none of them aligned correctly. You lean against your saddle for support, pretending you're adjusting the straps, but really you're trying not to throw up or fall down. Ideally, not both at once. The others dismount casually, stretch a little, then go about their business, checking tack, inspecting hooves, shaking dust from their deals. You want to ask if they ever feel like dying after a ride like that, but no one else even looks winded. One guy is literally humming. You try to help unsaddle your horse, but you fumble the knots. A younger boy, maybe 10, pushes you aside with a scowl and finishes the job in 5 seconds flat. You thank him. He doesn't respond, just leads the horse away and whistles once. The horse follows obediently, unlike yours, who seems to be reconsidering its loyalty entirely. Then comes the sound you dread. A whistle blast followed by the steady beat of boots in rhythm, not marching, disciplined drills. You glance around. Yep, everyone is lining up. Men, women, kids, everyone. Here's the thing. The Mongol Empire didn't function by chaos or brute force alone. It was held together by an astonishingly strict code of order known as the Yasa, Genghis Khan's semi-mythical legal code. Historians still argue whether the Yasa was ever written down, or if it lived entirely in oral form, but what's undeniable is this: you mess up, you pay. There are no official courts, no appeals, just swift justice delivered by your commander or the nearest elder. That could mean extra labor. It could mean getting tied to a post in the sun all day. Or in some cases, it could mean death, not dramatic death. Quiet, matter-of-fact, oops, shouldn't have stepped over that person's shadow death. You shuffle into line, trying to remember if you broke any rules today. Did you eat before the elders? Did you point your feet at the hearth? Did you mishandle a sacred object without realizing it? Did you sneeze too close to a saddle? The drill begins. It's a mock order relay. One person whispers instructions into another's ear and it spreads down the line like wildfire. You can barely understand what's being said. The person beside you frowns, then translates with a flick of their chin. You nod. Hopping it means walk forward and not raise your hand if guilty. You step forward. Everyone else steps back. Oops. There's a moment of tension. Then laughter. One of the commanders, a broad-shouldered man with a scar that looks like it was carved by a hawk, smirks. New meat, he mutters, then gives a hand gesture that clearly means get back in line before I make you a lesson. You obey swiftly. Later, you're assigned to help repair a broken cart. It's mostly hauling wood and tightening ropes, work that sounds simple until you realize your hands are soft, your fingers numb, and the tools are older than your language. You tug on a rawhide strap that refuses to budge. You pull again. It snaps. You fall backward into a pile of ashes. No one says anything, but someone tosses a bucket of water at the fire pit next to you with just a bit too much force. You get the message. Respect is not earned with words here. It's earned by action, quiet action, invisible competence. At mealtime, you eat second to last, just before the dog. It's not personal, it's just that you haven't proven yourself. Everyone watches how you chew, how much you take, whether you lick your fingers, whether you leave anything. Waste in the Mongol world is nearly a sin. You gnaw a bone clean and tuck it into your belt pouch. You don't know why, it just feels right. After the meal, a boy is caught lying about breaking a bowstring, just a small lie, a casual one, his punishment. A public lashing with a horsewhip, 3 quick strikes, then silence. No one flinches, no one intervenes, he doesn't even cry. You look away, you feel like you shouldn't. Later, a woman is rewarded. She stitched a torn saddle better than anyone else in camp. She's given a chunk of dried cheese and a kiss on the forehead from the matriarch. That's the other side of Mongol law, harsh but fair, at least by their standards. Still, you can't shake the feeling that eyes are on you, watching for your next mistake. Not with hostility, just curiosity, like they're wondering, how long can this one last? That night, during evening rest, you ask someone what happens to outsiders who fail to follow the rules. Depends, the man says. If we like them, we teach. If we do. He shrugs. You don't ask what that shrug means. Instead, you sit quietly by the fire, mending a rope you didn't break, tying knots you barely know, and hoping that tomorrow you'll remember which side of the yurt is sacred, which bowls are for Arag, and which hand you're allowed to gesture with during mealtime. You think again about the Yasa, not just a law, but a philosophy, a code that binds people across thousands of miles and dozens of tribes, a law that values silence over excuses, action over words. You wonder how long you'd last in this system before someone decided you weren't worth the leather you wore. Spoiler alert. Probably not long. You wake up coughing, your throat dry, your lips cracked, and the roof of your mouth tasting like someone sandpapered it overnight. The Mongolian wind is a trickster. It feels cool in the evening, almost gentle, but it steals every drop of moisture from you while you sleep. Your breath fogs slightly in the morning chill, even though it's the middle of summer. Outside your tent, or technically not your tent since you're a guest in a communal yurt, you hear the unmistakable snort of a horse and the low hum of voices already busy with the day. The sun's barely risen, but life here starts early, before full light, before you can even remember what day it is. And if yesterday was about riding, and the day before about discipline, today is about the most fundamental Mongol survival skill, living off the land. You step outside and are immediately put to work. You're handed a leather sack, a dull knife, and a woven net that looks like it was made by someone drunk on fermented mare's milk. Your mission: gather anything edible within a 2-kilometer radius. Don't eat berries you don't know, says an older woman with a knowing smile, unless you want your soul to meet your ancestors. You want to ask which berries are safe, but she's already turned away. So off you go, into the wide sun-bleached steppe, alone. Let's talk about foraging Mongol style, shall we? There are no maps, no GPS. You rely on the curve of the hills, the position of the sun, and landmarks like oddly shaped rocks or suspiciously lonely shrubs. You find a few roots, some wild onions, and miraculously, a small patch of wild garlic. You're ecstatic. Then you realize everyone else probably already knew about this spot. You just stumbled onto their backup foraging site. Congrats. You return to camp with your modest bounty, which is received with polite silence. No one praises you, but no one scowls either. This is likely the closest you'll come to a standing ovation. Now it's time for milking. If the Mongol Empire has a beating heart, it's not gold or conquest, it's the herd. Horses, goats, yaks, sheep, and the prized Bactrian camels. Milk is life. It's drunk fresh, dried into curd, churned into butter, fermented into arag. It's currency, nutrition, even ritual. Your job today is to milk a goat. Simple, right? Wrong. The goat hates you. You hate the goat, it's mutual. She dances. She dodges. She headbutts you in the shin. You sit down beside her, try to mimic what the others are doing, and get exactly one pathetic squirt of milk before she kicks the bowl over and storms off like a diva with a vendetta. A boy nearby milks 5 goats in the time it takes you to apologize to yours. You sigh, you're failing at this ancient, universal task, a task humans have done since the Neolithic age. But wait, there's more. In the afternoon, you're pulled aside and taken to the smoke tent. It's used for drying meat, strips of goat, mutton, even marmot, all sliced thin and hung like laundry from the ceiling. The smell is overwhelming, smoke, salt, and a tang you can't identify. You try to help hang the meat, but it keeps slipping. Your hands are slick with sweat and fat. One elder, watching you fumble with a slab of liver, mutters, "City fingers." You decide that's probably not a compliment. But it's not just about food production, it's about food preservation, and the Mongols are masters at it. In a world without refrigerators or even consistent shade, they've perfected techniques like drying, salting, and fermenting. They even have something called borts, dried meat so tough it has to be boiled for hours just to chew it. A single sheep's worth of borts can feed a warrior on the road for weeks. You sample a piece. It's like gnawing leather soaked in smoke, but you pretend to enjoy it just to fit in. Here's a fun fringe fact. Mongols sometimes used curdled milk as sunscreen, not because it smelled good, because it worked. Historians still argue whether it was goat, mare, or sheep milk that made the best sunblock, but what's certain is this. By midday, everyone is glistening with a light sheen of fermented dairy. It's a look, a scent, a lifestyle. Now it's time for water collection. You think, oh, cool water. But surprise, there's no stream, no spring, just a distant well half hidden in the valley. You walk there with 2 buckets suspended from a wooden yoke, like some parody of yourself in a survival movie. By the time you return, your shoulders are burning, your calves shaking, and most of the water has sloshed out anyway. No one comments. They just take what's left and move on. This is the Mongol way, efficient, unsentimental, forgiving maybe, but only once. Then comes evening, Dinner. Tonight it's Bortsog deep-fried dough served with butter and dried curd. The carbs are a mercy. The taste is mild, comforting, even nostalgic. For a brief moment, you forget how sunburned your nose is and how your thighs still ache from the saddle. For just a few bites, you almost feel okay. You sit on the ground near the fire, watching a girl repair a cracked pot with clay and hair. Nearby, two old men argue about whether the best camel fur comes from the neck or the underbelly. You try not to eavesdrop. You fail. The stars come out in a sheet. And for the first time since you arrived, you feel awe, not fear. Not exhaustion, just awe. The Mongol Empire isn't just brutal riding, harsh discipline, or smoked mutton. It's survival, yes, but it's also adaptation, ingenuity, a dance with the elements so old that most people forgot the steps long ago. You pull your deal tighter around you, using a thin rope to bind it at the waist, and stretch your legs toward the fatting warmth of the fire. Your hands are blistered. Your mouth still tastes like garlic and smoke. But in this moment, just this one, you feel like you might make it to morning. Just don't ask for another goat. You're woken not by voices or footsteps, but by the hissing wind raking across the plain. The yurt creaks softly around you, stretched felt groaning against its frame. The fire's embers have gone dull and red. You sit up, your body objecting with every sore muscle it can muster. Outside, it's not just morning, it's training time. You know it before they say it. The air has that buzz to it, the restless packing of horses, the occasional barked command, the metallic clink of weapons being inspected. Mongol society, for all its domestic tenderness and harmony with the land, was built to move, and more importantly, to fight. You step outside just in time to witness a boy of maybe 12 lashing a straw dummy from horseback at full gallop. The blade in his hand is real. The target isn't just for show. Welcome to warrior training, Mongol style. Now don't imagine a centralized military camp, banners flying, rows of soldiers in armor. The Mongol method is more subtle and far more dangerous. Every able-bodied male is expected to train constantly, even if he's not currently on campaign. And training doesn't mean running drills or polishing boots. It means living as if war could arrive any day, because it could. You're handed a bow. Not a longbow, not a modern recurve. This is a composite Mongol bow, sinew, horn, and wood, wrapped tightly and curved backward in a graceful arc. It feels smaller than you expect, and far more lethal. A seasoned archer can fire 6 arrows in the time it takes you to draw one. You don't believe that until you watch a girl half your size do it. You try your first shot. The arrow veers wildly, landing somewhere in the tall grass where it will remain forever, a small shame buried in the steppe. You try again, and again. Your instructor, a man who could pass for a tree stump with a mustache, grunts with disapproval, then silently walks over and adjusts your grip. He says nothing, just fixes your form, then walks away. The third arrow strikes the edge of the target. You exhale victory. Here's your mainstream historical fact of the day. The Mongol army was one of the most mobile and strategically innovative forces the world has ever seen. They didn't just conquer, they disoriented, misled, and outpaced their enemies. It wasn't about brute strength. It was about precision and movement, a philosophy rooted in their culture from childhood. And they started young. Even toddlers learned to balance on the backs of goats before graduating to ponies. By the age of 5 or 6, a Mongol child could ride at a gallop while standing, turning, or firing a bow. The result: by adulthood, warfare wasn't a profession. It was an extension of daily life. Now you're invited to try that most infamous skill, the moving shot. You're placed on a small, patient horse who clearly knows more about this than you do. Someone ties your knees to the saddle. This is either a safety precaution or a prank. No one tells you which. You begin at a trot, bow in hand, arrow knocked. The instructor signals. You pull, aim, and nearly fall off sideways as the horse jolts into a canter. Your arrow fires straight into the dirt. You fire another, grazing the corner of a dummy before accidentally dropping your third. The children clap. You're not sure if it's mockery or encouragement. Either way, you bow. Next is weapon handling, specifically the saber. You're given a saber with a slight curve. It's not heavy, but it demands balance. The Mongol saber isn't about brute slicing. It's about finesse, arcing, whipping slashes that keep the enemy off balance. You're taught to swing from the wrist, not the shoulder. The goal is endurance. You're not fighting one man. You're fighting 10, in the cold, on horseback. And here's a quirky tidbit for the day. Some Mongol warriors train using meat targets. They'd suspend slabs of raw meat from poles and practice slicing clean through them without disturbing the support. Mess up the cut, you're buying dinner, or worse, you are dinner. Kidding, mostly. You practice the slash over and over again. Your hands blister, your shoulders scream, and your grip, slippery with sweat, finally drops the blade. You nearly take your own foot off. You're improving, someone says. You're not sure if they're lying. Now comes the endurance test. You're told to ride and just keep riding. No direction, no goal. Just keep pace with your guide, who appears to be doing this more for sport than training. You gallop across the plains, past gopher holes, over shallow dips, beneath a sky so open it feels judgmental. You pass a cluster of gazelles. A lone eagle watches from a high perch. And after an hour, just when your thighs have turned to pudding and your mouth feels like the inside of a boot, you stop. Your guide looks at you, nods, and says something in Mongolian you don't catch. But his face says it all. Not terrible. That's high praise here. Back in camp, you expect to collapse. But no, there's a demonstration tonight, one you must attend. A group of elite warriors puts on a mock battle. You sit in the grass as they reenact a lightning raid. Riders spread out, encircle, attack, retreat, then regroup. It's not flashy, it's surgical. You realize something chilling. They could take down a trained army before lunch, and they'd still be home in time to milk the goats. You ask one elder why they train so much, even during peacetime. He replies, peace is just the space between arrows. Historians still argue whether the Mongol war machine was driven more by ideology, necessity, or plain survival instinct. But after watching these riders, you think it might just be habit, like breathing. Dinner is roasted lamb, eaten with fingers. No cutlery, no fuss. You're handed a blade to slice your portion, and you're warned cutting meat cleanly with honor is just as important as riding well. You try, the meat tears a little, you get a few chuckles, you bow again. You're starting to get used to this role, the eager fool among legends. As night falls, the mood softens. Someone plays a morin cooer, the horsehead fiddle, and the sound echoes across the steppe like wind through bone. It's haunting, lonely, and impossibly beautiful. You feel a lump in your throat. You lie back on the grass, stare at the stars, and realize that being a warrior here isn't about violence. It's about readiness, the calm before and during the storm. And you're not ready. Not yet. But you haven't given up. Not just yet. Morning comes with a thud, literally. Someone drops a bundle of firewood beside your sleeping mat and grunts something that probably means up. Your joints are jelly, your eyelids glued together, and your back feels like it wrestled a yak and lost. But no one's waiting for your excuses, not in the Mongol Empire. Today's lesson, survival in motion. Because while you've barely gotten used to life in a stationary yurt, the Mongols rarely stayed still. And when the horde moved, it moved with everything. Families, livestock, tents, supplies, entire mobile industries packed into ox-drawn carts. So you pack up, or more accurately, you watch everyone else pack up, trying to imitate their brisk, practiced efficiency. The yurt folds like origami. Within minutes, it's a compact bundle on a cart. You blink and it's as if the camp never existed. You're handed a saddlebag. Not a large one, just enough to hold essentials. A felt blanket, a flint kit, dried meat, fermented mare's milk, and a small pouch of coins stamped with the Khan's seal. You hesitate. Where are we going? Someone shrugs, west. And just like that, you're a speck in the migration. This isn't a military campaign, just a routine seasonal move, part of the endless rotation across the grasslands. But even this, you learn, is a matter of life and death. Miss the timing, graze the wrong spot, let your horses overeat one patch of land, and your whole clan might suffer come winter. You ride with a caravan of families, each cart creaking under the weight of felt and memory. The children laugh and chase dogs, the old women sing, and yet no one relaxes. Everyone's eyes stay on the horizon. Clouds are watched like omens. The wind is tasted like wine. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Mongols were not just raiders or warriors. They were nomadic logisticians, masters of seasonal cycles, animal management, and supply coordination. Their entire society was built to move, not randomly, but with astounding strategic foresight. You learn quickly that riding all day is not the hard part. The hard part is riding while maintaining control of your belongings, your horse, your hydration, your balance, and your dignity, which you lost around hour 3, somewhere near a prairie dog hole. Midday heat bakes the steppe into a mirage-ridden sea. You squint at the horizon and see ghost herds in the distance, flickering like memory. Sweat crusts your brow. Your lips chap. You reach for the fermented mare's milk. Mistake. It's sour, salty, slightly fizzy, and it punches your stomach like it owes it money. The others drink it like water. One woman offers you a lump of sun-dried cheese and you chew it carefully, trying not to break a molar. It gets better, she says, in about a year. As the caravan breaks briefly for rest, you watch a family butcher a sheep with quiet reverence. Every part will be used. Organs, intestines, hide, hooves. Waste is not tolerated here, not out of piety, but because on the steppe, waste is weakness. And here's your quirky tidbit of the day. Mongols carried a kind of emergency ration called borts, dried meat, pounded into flakes so lightweight and portable that warriors could ride with weeks' worth of meals in a pouch. Just add water or broth and voila, steppe soup. Fancy? No. Effective? Extremely. The wind picks up in the afternoon. A dry, rasping wind that speaks in dust. You pull your cloak tighter, but the grit finds its way in, into your nose, your ears, your teeth. You sneeze and nearly fall off your horse. A child nearby giggles and mimics your sneeze. Later, a distant rider gallops up. Everyone turns, alert. For a moment, you think it's an ambush, but it's just a scout delivering news. A river's flooded 2 days west and the caravan will reroute. No argument, no panic, just a silent adjustment. The whole moving village veers as one, like a school of fish. And that's when it hits you, the orchestration of this life. Each family is a note in a melody that's been playing for centuries. No written maps, no GPS. Just inherited knowledge, encoded in stories, in stars, in instinct. The Mongols don't conquer because they're lucky. They do it because they've trained for uncertainty, because they've mastered motion. By evening, camp is set again. You're stunned by how quickly it all reappears. Fires lit, goats herded, children fed, beds unrolled. You're handed a bowl of soup made from bones you watched be stripped earlier that day. You sip it slowly. It's oddly comforting, earthy, real. As you sit beside the fire, an elder woman begins to hum. Her voice is cracked but clear, and the melody carries over the wind like a thread. A lullaby, you think, or maybe a warning. You ask a younger man nearby if he misses living in one place. He raises an eyebrow. Why would I stay in one place just to grow hungry? And just like that, your world tilts, again. Historians still argue whether Mongol expansion was driven by ecological pressure, droughts, overgrazing, shifting pastures, or by sheer ambition. But riding with this caravan, you sense it wasn't so binary. Hunger and glory can live in the same saddlebag. You sleep under the stars again, your body so tired it hurts to blink. The fire crackles low. Somewhere in the dark, a horse whinnies. Someone laughs. Someone sings. Someone sharpens a blade. And you lie still, wondering if you've learned anything at all, or just survived the day by accident. Tomorrow you keep moving, again. The wind never really stops out here. It just changes shape. Sometimes it whispers across the grass like a warning. Other times, like tonight, it howls through the bones of the land like a challenge. You wake to the smell of smoke and the taste of dust. Again. No roosters, no bells, just the low murmur of people already loading carts, saddling animals, and boiling whatever can be boiled for breakfast. Your body has stopped protesting. It has surrendered. Today, you're traveling with a smaller group, 5 riders and a goat cart, sent ahead as scouts to find safer grazing land. You're not sure who decided you were qualified for this task, but before you could object, someone tossed you a water skin and said, "Don't fall off." Too late to back out now. Riding ahead, your guide, an older warrior named Adril, barely speaks. He points. You follow, that's the rhythm. There's something reassuring in it. In a world full of questions, the Mongols seem to live inside answers. You envy that. As the sun rises, the vastness around you stops being beautiful and becomes something else, something primal. You've never known emptiness could feel so crowded. The sky presses down. The horizon never gets closer. You begin to understand why Mongols believed in spirits of land and sky. When the world is this big, you need names for things that watch you back. Your horse snorts and slows. Up ahead, Adril raises a fist. Everyone stops. You squint. A smudge of movement in the distance, a trail of dust, a flicker of shapes, not friendly ones. And just like that, your day becomes a negotiation with fear. Turns out, border tensions aren't just imperial politics. They're lived reality. The Mongol Empire at its height stretched across Eurasia, yes, but that didn't mean everyone inside was peaceful. Rival clans, displaced enemies, and ambitious upstarts made sure violence was always in the rear view. You duck behind a rise and watch as the figures pass in the distance. Not a full warband, but armed. Possibly a scouting party, possibly not Mongol. Adril mutters something you don't catch. He motions to move quietly. You realize something then. Everyone in this land is armed, but not everyone is at war. Still, peace here feels like a balancing act on horseback, one strong gust away from collapse. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Mongols developed one of the most complex intelligence networks of the pre-modern world. YAM, or relay stations, covered the empire, with riders passing messages at breakneck speed. Their version of the Pony Express, but faster, more brutal and capable of moving imperial decrees from Mongolia to Persia in days. That kind of reach didn't happen by chance. It took constant vigilance and 1,000 backup plans. You veer north to avoid the strangers. The path takes you through rougher country now, drier, rockier, where the grass thins and the animals grow skittish. You stop at a small stream where birds scatter at your approach. The water tastes metallic but cold. It'll do. Adril finally speaks. Once my uncle lost his whole family crossing this way. Sudden snow, in summer. You wait for more, there isn't any. That's the story. Nature here doesn't need drama, it has timing. Back on the trail, you catch the scent of something acrid, smoke, faint but growing. You crest a hill and see it, a burned-out camp abandoned recently. Blackened yurts, charred wood, broken wheels, not looted, just destroyed. You're not allowed to linger. Just enough time to scan for signs, guess who might have done this, and move on. The Mongols didn't just read books, they read landscapes like scrolls. You, meanwhile, can barely tell dung smoke from wood fire. Here's your quirky tidbit. Mongol scouts often carried bird cages with falcons or eagles, not just for hunting, but as status symbols, portable companions, even spiritual talismans. A good falconer was as respected as a good warrior. Today, Adril carries a hawk. He whispers to it more than to you. By late afternoon, you find signs of a small, untouched valley, lush and green, protected by ridges, ideal for grazing. There are old tracks here. The land remembers hooves. This place has fed many mouths, and tonight may be yours. The party dismounts, stakes the goats, sets a fire. You gather sticks, proud of your minor contribution, until you reach for a branch that slithers. Snake. It disappears before you scream. You do not share this detail with the group. They already think you're soft. As the sun dips low, turning everything gold, Adril finally laughs. You ride like a merchant, he says, but maybe you will not die. A compliment, you assume, probably. Historians still argue whether the Mongols were brutal outliers or just the logical outcome of harsh geography and adaptive genius. But on days like this, it seems simpler. They were survivors, not just of battle, but of cold, thirst, betrayal, boredom, randomness. That takes a different kind of toughness. You lie back on your saddle blanket under a pine that leans like it's tired of wind. The hawk sits on a post nearby, one eye on you. The fire crackles low. Tomorrow, you'll return to the main caravan with the good news. You'll bring maps drawn in the dirt, coordinates marked by trees, stories burned into memory. You'll sleep lightly tonight. Everyone here does. But in this moment, under the bruised blue sky of the steppe, you feel something you haven't since arriving: capable. Still soft, still confused, still deeply not Mongol, but surviving, participating, learning. You wonder if the land has noticed. Morning doesn't so much arrive here as it unveils itself slowly, light bleeding through the fabric of the world, the wind carrying with it the breath of distant fires and unseen hooves. You're already awake. Everyone is. Sleep, like everything else in the Mongol Empire, obeys necessity more than comfort. You stretch your aching limbs, trying not to wince. The ground doesn't get softer, no matter how long you lie on it. The others pack up with quiet efficiency, and soon the little party is on the move again, returning to the main encampment to report the valley's location. The return route is different, winding along a low ridge where the wind bites at your face, and the silence grows thick with unspoken thought. You pass by a solitary stone cairn, roughly stacked. Not Mongol, possibly a burial marker, or a warning, or maybe just a lonely reminder that someone else walked this path before you. Your group stops at a yam station, one of the many courier relay outposts strung across the empire like pearls on a string. It's a squat wooden structure with a stone hearth, a pen for horses, and a tired-looking boy tending to them. Inside, dried meat hangs from the beams, and the smell of horse sweat clings to the walls like wallpaper. You sit beside the fire while Adril scratches a message onto a small strip of birch bark. His script is tight and fast. He writes like someone who's learned to ration both ink and breath. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The yam system was a backbone of the Mongol administrative machine, an imperial postal network with supply depots and fresh horses every 25 to 40 kilometers. Riders carried passwords known as jerej, bronze medallions that proved their right to requisition food, shelter, and new mounts. A Mongol courier could travel over 200 miles in a single day. That's Uber Eats for decrees, centuries before Wi-Fi. A boy is dispatched to send the message onward. You don't know where it's going. You don't ask. In the Mongol world, information flows like arrows, fast, silent, and rarely back toward you. You eat quietly. The meat is hard and salted beyond belief, but your teeth are used to working overtime by now. Someone pours fermented mare's milk into a horn cup and hands it to you. It's sour, fizzy, and faintly alive. You drink it anyway. There's a lull, and that's when Adril speaks again. You know who taught us this system, he says, staring into the fire. Genghis, not just how to kill, but how to listen, how to carry words as sharp as blades. You blink, a rare moment of poetry from him. He glances at you. You carry words soft, but they still land. You have no idea what to say to that. so you just nod like a good listener. Outside, a trader arrives dragging a battered cart. His sleeves are embroidered, unusual here, and he's speaking what sounds like Persian to the station boy. You step outside, curious, and catch a glimpse of his wares: silk, bone dice, packets of spice, and startlingly, a piece of Chinese paper currency, wrinkled but real. He notices your interest and laughs. "This, not worth a sheep up north," he says in passable Mongolian, "but in the south they'll kill for it." Here's your quirky tidbit. Paper money was introduced to the Mongol world through their conquest of China. While traditional Mongols valued livestock, silk, and silver, they also saw the value in currency that didn't weigh down your saddlebag. Marco Polo even marveled at it, writing of bark paper bills as if they were sorcery. Mongol rulers enforced the currency's value with terrifying consistency. Refuse it, and you could lose more than your trade license. You trade a spare knife for a few salted apricots. The merchant winks and slips you a worn playing die. "Luck," he says, or lies, same thing. Back on the trail, you follow a new set of tracks, heavier ones, likely carts. Not yours, though. You didn't make this road. The Empire did. And here comes your open scholarly debate for today. Historians still argue whether the Mongol Empire was truly a globalizer in the modern sense, or whether it simply flattened the map by force, allowing others to connect through the wake of its devastation. What is certain, though, is this: under Mongol rule, goods, people, languages, and diseases moved across continents faster than ever before. Even now, in the bones of this horse trail, you can feel it, the weight of connection. How many others passed here before you? How many stories braided into one another across the empire's arteries? You ride until late. By the time the main camp comes into view, yurts like pale mushrooms dotting the slope, you're coated in dust, half asleep in the saddle, and wondering if your spine will ever forgive you. But the welcome is warm. A pot of stew bubbles on the fire. You report the valley, point to your dirt map, and they nod like it was already known. Maybe it was. That night, beneath a sky smeared with stars, you lie awake wondering about the unseen couriers galloping somewhere out there in the dark, birch bark messages flapping like bird wings in the wind. And you realize something. Power isn't just about strength. It's about reach. About being able to speak across time zones, across battlefields, across lifetimes. The Mongols knew this. That's why they survived not just as conquerors, but as connectors. You shift under your blanket, the die from the merchant still in your pocket. Maybe tomorrow you'll roll it. The morning air carries the scent of horses, dried dung smoke, and boiled meat, a fragrance you're weirdly growing fond of. Your joints creak as you rise, but your body has begun to adapt in spite of itself. Or maybe it's surrender. Either way, today you won't be scouting, riding, or mapping. Today, you're assigned to watch the sky. You don't get much instruction. You're just handed a long, curved horn, like something a biblical angel would carry if angels were extremely sleep-deprived and smelled like leather, and pointed toward a ridge overlooking the plain. Your job: stand there, look out, blow the horn if you see anything strange. What qualifies as strange? You ask, you get a shrug. You'll know. So up you go. From the ridge, the steppe opens up like a painter's canvas, vast and horizontal. The yurts behind you gleam white in the sun, a tight little constellation of order in the middle of the universe's lawn. You wait, and you watch, and you wait. At first it feels boring. Then it starts to feel like something else entirely, a strange kind of meditation. The land breathes. Wind moves in sheets over the grass. You begin to spot patterns, how the birds wheel when rodents stir, how clouds fracture before a storm, how silence isn't actually silent if you listen hard enough. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Mongols relied heavily on a vast and flexible early warning system. From scouts and messengers to hilltop sentinels with flags or horns, their military efficiency depended on information traveling faster than their enemies could act. This real-time feedback loop is part of what made their war machine so unstoppable. Communication wasn't just a tool, it was a weapon. You spot a dust plume on the horizon. Too small for an army, too big for a lone rider. You squint. Eventually, the figures resolve. 3 riders and a cart, maybe merchants or travelers seeking safe passage. Still, your hand hovers near the horn. Just in case. You glance down at your boots, cracked and caked in fine yellow dust, and it hits you. You're not the tourist anymore. You're part of the machine now, a living gear in a system that covers thousands of miles. Your eyes are their defense. Adril joins you after a while, carrying dried fruit and a jug of water. He sits without speaking. You nod at the distant travelers, friends. He snorts, everyone's a friend until they're not. Fair. He hands you a dried plum. You chew slowly, watching the horizon breathe. And here's your quirky tidbit. The Mongols trained birds of prey, especially golden eagles, not just for hunting but for messaging and ritual. In some tribes, the appearance of certain birds was read as an omen. If you saw an eagle soaring to the east at dawn, it might mean your warpath would be blessed. Or it might mean breakfast. Interpretations varied. You spot one now, a silhouette against the sky, a big one gliding without flapping. You point. Adril nods. Good luck, he murmurs. You half joke, for whom? He shrugs. Someone. The travelers arrive hours later, escorted in by another patrol. They bring textiles, news from the south, and a new saddle design some herder down by the Yellow River swears will change everything. The commander listens politely, nods, and assigns them temporary space outside the camp's perimeter. The Mongols are curious but cautious. They know empires fall from within, not just from outside raids. You've seen how they vet newcomers. 3 separate interviews, personal inspection of wares, and an unsettling tendency to sniff things before buying. Still, they listen. They always listen. And here's your open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Mongol Empire encouraged open borders, as we understand the term, or whether their openness was purely strategic, built on intense surveillance and brutal enforcement. Were they cosmopolitan idealists, or control freaks who simply happened to benefit from foreign ideas? What you know standing on this ridge is that information is currency. A song from Persia, a saddle from China, a weather pattern from the Himalayas, all of it matters. The next morning, you're given a gift. A small notebook, handmade, blank pages. Adril hands it over without ceremony. You watch, you write. You blink, why me? He doesn't answer directly, just says, someone has to remember. So now you're a scribe, a scout, a sky watcher. It's unclear. The Mongols are many things, brutal, pragmatic, unsentimental, but they do value observation, witnessing, memory. So you begin writing. Not about battles, not yet, but about the wind, the plum, the eagle, about how your skin smells like horse and your dreams now arrive in Mongolian. The dust from the traveler's cart hasn't settled yet, and the sun has already begun to dip westward, painting the land in gold and blood orange. A horn sounds in the distance, 1 blast, then 2. You're up before you even realize it. Adril's gone. Horses are being saddled. Someone yells for you to grab your gear. You run. This is how it goes. Moments of stillness swallowed by the surge. There is no normal in the Mongol Empire, only what's next. You gallop now, again. The moment the horn sounded, the calm of skywatching was over. Riders broke into motion like a wind scattering dry leaves, and you, without understanding the full picture, fell in line. Because by now, you know enough to not be the one asking questions mid-gallop. The ground is rough beneath your horse, a hardpack of trampled grass and rock that offers no forgiveness to the unbalanced. You grip the reins with the desperation of someone who now knows just how bad it is to fall behind. No one explained what you're riding toward, and no one will. You've learned that Mongol orders travel fast, and explanations arrive late, if at all. What you do know is this: a scouting party hasn't returned. 3 men, all experienced, vanished somewhere in the low foothills near a seasonal riverbed. No messages, no riders, no smoke signals. The assumption is simple and chilling: ambush. You reach the edge of a shallow ravine by late morning, the squad spreading out without command. You scan the ground for movement or for vultures. You find neither. But then you find the horse. It's grazing quietly, reins dragging in the dust. No wounds, no panic. It's the eeriness of the scene that grips you, because if the horse is calm, that means the ambush wasn't loud. It was silent, efficient. You dismount as instructed, time to track. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Mongol armies were taught to read the earth like a manuscript. Tracks, crushed foliage, broken twigs, and even bent grass blades could betray where an enemy had gone and how fast. Some units trained from childhood to detect if a rider was wounded just by the uneven weight distribution in hoof marks. It wasn't mysticism. It was repetition, drilled over years. You kneel beside a cluster of hoofprints. They're older than the ones you made coming in. Different pattern, maybe 4 horses, maybe more. You point and Adril nods without looking. He's already seen them. He's watching you to see if you'll see them too. You feel strangely honored and also terrified. The next 2 hours are slow. Deliberate. And then a smell. Smoke. Faint, like old clothes hung too close to a fire. You angle toward it, ducking low into the shrubs and twisted undergrowth of a shallow dell. And that's where you find the bodies. 2 of them. The 3rd scout is missing. The corpses have been posed, not just killed, but arranged. One is kneeling, head hanging forward, arms stretched out as if mid-prayer. The other is seated against a rock, eyes wide open, lips sewn shut with coarse thread. You feel your stomach churn. And here's your quirky tidbit. While the Mongols were notorious for their psychological warfare, they were not the only ones playing that game. Several enemy cultures, including certain steppe rebels and Tangut holdouts, engaged in brutal scare tactics, from corpse mutilation to ritual posing of dead soldiers as warnings. Some even believed that keeping the eyes open in death allowed the spirit to report back to the heavens. You don't touch the bodies, you don't need to. The message is clear: leave. But Mongols don't retreat because someone tried to rattle them. You sweep the area, you find drag marks, a trail. Still fresh. The 3rd scout might be alive. The squad forms up again, 10 riders, silent, efficient, eyes flicking like hawks. You follow the drag marks into a rocky canyon. It narrows, too narrow. Adril raises a fist. Everyone stops. Something's wrong. And then movement. From the rocks above, a volley of arrows rains down. You throw yourself sideways, landing hard on gravel as one arrow whizzes past your left shoulder. Chaos, but not disorder. The Mongols train for this. They expect treachery. Within seconds, riders are off their horses, fanning out, returning fire with precise arcs that curve upward and drop like falling stars. You scramble behind a boulder, heart hammering so loud you can barely hear your own breath. Adril tosses you a shortbow. You've trained with it twice. You notch the arrow with shaking hands. You don't even know what you're aiming at. Then you see him. A bandit or rebel or war orphan, it doesn't matter. He's crouched above you, lining up a shot. You raise your bow and fire. You miss. But you make him flinch, and that's enough. Adril's arrow finds him a second later. It's over fast. The ambush was small. A handful of desperate fighters hopping for a psychological win. Instead, they're dead. And the 3rd scout, found hours later bleeding but alive. Tortured, yes, but intact. He'll live. As the sun dips low, you help carry him back to camp. One shoulder under his weight, you don't speak. You're too tired. And maybe a little afraid of your own silence. Here's your open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Mongol efficiency in ambush response came from rigid doctrine or decentralized initiative. In short, were they reacting fast because of training, or because each unit trusted its members to act without waiting for orders? Genghis Khan emphasized both, absolute obedience to leadership and fluid, autonomous action in the field, a paradox that worked. That night back at camp, there's no celebration. No vengeance speech, no chest thumping. Just quiet. You sit by the fire watching sparks drift upward like tiny souls. Someone plays a flute, not a triumphant tune, something slow, something a little broken. Adril passes you a flask. You didn't run, he says. You want to correct him. You did. You ran behind a boulder, you trembled, you missed your only shot. But you accept the compliment. And the drink. The Mongol Empire doesn't require perfection. Just presence. You wake to drums. Not the kind you expected. No pounding war rhythm, no galloping beat. These are slow, like heartbeats soaked in sleep. They echo through the pre-dawn mist, pulsing across the encampment like the footfalls of something vast and ancient. A man has died. Not in battle, in camp. Old age, or what counts for it here. Mid-40s maybe. A cavalry commander from the days of Genghis himself, someone whose life spanned decades of dust, fire, and horse sweat. You never spoke to him, but you saw him once. Sharp cheekbones, eyes like chiseled flint, a jaw that hadn't relaxed in years. And now he's gone. No wailing, no parade of sobbing relatives, just preparation, and reverence in a form you barely understand. You follow the others, drawn in by rhythm, by smoke, by a magnetic hush. They're building something. Not a pyre, not a grave. A bundle. The body is wrapped in layers of felt, leather, and silk, bound tightly, then secured to the side of a horse. It doesn't look ceremonial, it looks like a traveler getting ready to leave. Only this time, it's the horse that does the walking. You're not invited to help, but you're allowed to witness. That's something. Mainstream historical fact here. The Mongols had no single, uniform burial custom. Genghis Khan himself was famously buried in secret, with his grave unmarked and possibly trampled by horses to erase its location. But across the steppes, death was often treated with pragmatic reverence. Bodies might be carried to high ground, or hidden in valleys, or even consumed by the open sky through sky burials. What mattered most? That the dead returned to nature. The horse begins its walk slow, measured. 2 riders follow, then 3. You stay behind. It's not your ritual, but you feel its weight anyway. Afterward, camp life resumes, but subdued. Chores are quieter, laughter is rarer. Even Adril doesn't tease you today. Instead, he shows you how to shape a compound bow. It's a long process. Wood, sinew, horn, and glue, all bent into a weapon that defines the Mongol way of life. He lets you touch the glue. It's made from fish bladders, boiled into a sticky resin that smells faintly of the sea. You ask how long it takes to make one. Month, he says, and your patience. He smiles. He means your soul. Quirky tidbit. Mongol bows were asymmetrical, shorter on the bottom limb than the top. This wasn't bad craftsmanship. It was pure logic. A shorter bottom half made the bow easier to use on horseback, preventing it from bumping into the horse or ground during rapid shooting. Mongol bowyers were engineers in animal hide. The hours drift. You help carry water. You muck out the pens. You fetch firewood. None of this is glamorous. None of it makes you a warrior, but it does something more dangerous. It makes you useful. And usefulness is how you survive here. By mid-afternoon, the quiet breaks. A group of messengers arrives from the south, their horses sweating and mouths foaming. You watch as they dismount and are immediately pulled aside by the camp's leaders. The discussion is brisk. you catch a word. Tengri. It's not a name, it's everything. Sky god, fate, balance. You've heard them whisper it in the dark, shout it in battle, mutter it as thanks for a good meal. Tengri isn't worshipped the way other gods are. It's more like gravity. Omnipresent. Inarguable. The skies will made real. The news is unclear, but it shakes the camp. Within an hour, orders are barked, packs thrown together, tents folded, wagons aligned. You ask Adril if it's war again. He shrugs, always. Then he hands you a bundle. You recognize it, it's the bow you helped shape, strung now and gleaming with tension. He points at it, then points at you. Your stomach tightens, but you don't protest. Because here's your open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Mongol soldiers were drafted by force, or whether they internalized their role so completely that war became their default identity. Were they patriots, conscripts, fanatics, or pragmatists? Maybe yes to all. Maybe none of those words even fit the mindset of a man who sees the sky as law and his horse as home. The migration begins. It's not a march, it's a river. Everything moves. Herds, tents, warriors, children. Smoke trails behind them like long black ribbons fraying into dusk. You ride again. You've learned the rhythm now. How to conserve energy in the saddle. How to rest one eye without losing awareness. How to eat dried meat without choking on the salt. Night falls. A cold wind rides with you. There's no campfire tonight. No songs. Just the sound of hooves and rattling tack in the distant, almost inaudible hush of history shifting. You don't know where you're going, but you know what you are now. A part of it. Your bones ache. Not the sharp, bruised kind of pain you once got from overdoing a gym workout or sleeping wrong on a pillow, but a deep, foundational fatigue, like your entire skeleton is negotiating with gravity and losing. It's been days now, or weeks. Honestly, you've stopped keeping track. The caravan keeps moving. The horizon stays flat, enormous, hypnotic. Sometimes it swells into brown hills. Sometimes it buckles into jagged ridges, stone fingers scraping the sky. But mostly it's just endless openness. Steppe, sky, you, and the Mongols. You don't ride in formation anymore. You ride with them. You've learned not to ask questions. When to eat, when to shut up, when to dismount and walk for a while, leading your horse to rest its back. You've learned to sleep in your boots, to shave with a knife, to pee with one eye open. Because out here, there are no second chances. Not from the weather, which turns savage in minutes. Not from rival clans, who sometimes appear on the horizon like ghosts, then vanish again. And definitely not from your own camp, where even a stolen scrap of meat can get your fingers cut off, if you're lucky. You're no longer a guest. You're a variable. Maybe even an asset. Maybe. By now, you've begun to understand what no book ever quite captures. The Mongol Empire isn't a place. It's a momentum. A storm system of people, muscle, animals, and ambition that never really stops. It collapses space. Where other armies trudge, this one glides. Where other civilizations rise from stone, this one carries everything on horseback. It doesn't build, it consumes, moves, strikes. And you're still not one of them. But you're not quite modern anymore either. Mainstream historical fact. At the height of its power in the 13th century, the Mongol Empire was the largest contiguous land empire in human history, stretching from Korea to Hungary, from Siberia to the Indian subcontinent. And they maintained it not with static walls or ornate cities, but with sheer mobile force, advanced communication, like the Yam postal relay system, and an uncanny ability to adapt to conquered territories without becoming like them. Tonight there's a fire. A big one. You're allowed to sit close. It's a feast of sorts, a celebration after a victory, minor perhaps, but every skirmish is worth marking. A rival clan was scattered, horses recovered, A few yurts burned. You didn't fight in it, but you sharpened weapons, loaded carts, helped boil glue for arrow fletching. You were useful again. You watched the warriors drink fermented mare's milk, arag, sharp and strange. They sing. The songs are rough, full of unexpected humor. One of the older riders belts out a verse about a horse that outruns his master out of sheer boredom. Everyone laughs. Even you. Quirky tidbit. Genghis Khan reportedly banned bathing during certain times of the year, not out of superstition, but because Mongols believed that disturbing water spirits during thunderstorms or spiritual events could bring bad luck or even death. This gave rise to many stories from foreign travelers about the Mongols' unusual hygiene rules, though ironically, they were often healthier than the sedentary city dwellers they conquered. Later, a man you barely know hands you a carved bone dice. He doesn't speak. He just sets it in your palm, then walks away. You look at it for a while. It's stained, polished smooth. The corners are worn. Someone has thrown it 1,000 times, maybe more. You turn it over. One side has a crude glyph, some mix of clan symbol and private joke. You don't know what it means, but you know it means you're still here. And that's something, because here's your final scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Mongol Empire was a brutal wave of destruction, or a strange kind of globalizer, kickstarting connections across Eurasia, encouraging trade, transmitting ideas, spreading technology. Was it apocalypse or acceleration? Was it terror or transformation? The truth, like your dice, rolls both ways. That night, Audril comes to sit beside you. He doesn't say much, just stares into the fire. You realize this is goodbye. Not forever, just for now. You're being transferred somewhere else, another detachment, another purpose. You're ready. At least you hope you are. He hands you a water skin and a dried meat pouch. Then he nods once. You nod back. It's weird. You've spoken more to this man with gestures than with language. And yet, in a strange way, you understand him better than some people you've known your whole life. Dawn will come soon. And with it, your next trial. You're not strong. You're not brave. But you're still here. And that in the Mongol Empire is a victory. So now you lie back, wrapped in a blanket that still smells faintly of smoke and horsehair. The fire's gone low. The stars above are brighter than any city's skyline, scattered across the endless ceiling of the world. Your horse is somewhere nearby, its breath rising in soft, ghostly puffs. And your heart still beating. Slower now, calmer. Not because the world is safer, but because you've changed. You've touched a life that moved without maps, a people who carried entire civilizations in leather saddlebags, who saw borders not as walls, but as windswept invitations. You've lived their rhythms, even just for a while. Felt the bite of their winters, the raw joy of their gallops, the gravity of their silence. And whether you would have lasted another day or not, doesn't really matter now. Because you did last this one. So close your eyes. Feel your pulse sink with hoofbeats you can't hear anymore. Let the wind fade to a whisper. And let that whisper become sleep. Sweet dreams.